Welcome into another Dribbling Around interview. Hadn't had any guests in a while, but we are very excited to be joined by one of the best up-and-coming stars of the sports broadcasting business, LA Clippers radio play-by-play man, Noah Eagle. Noah, thanks for coming on Dribbling Around.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you haven't had any guests in a while, so this makes me feel extra special now. I feel extra special every day because I tell myself I'm extra special, which might be true, might not be true, who knows? But I feel like if you tell yourself enough, you fake it till you make it, you believe it. So thanks for having me. I just went on a long tangent.
Of course, great advice. Great advice to start off. We love it. And of course, 2020 has been absolutely crazy. It's been crazy for us as college kids. It's been crazy for you as a broadcaster. But we're going to start taking back to the bubble when it shut down. So tell us, what specifically did you remember about the night the league shut down, and what was the communication you had with players on that night?
Oh, everything. You remember everything. That's one of those moments of where were you when? There are those flashbulb memories, they're called, where you can pinpoint exactly where you were and what you were doing. So for me, it was the buildup more than anything else, because the day before we had played a game against the Golden State Warriors in San Francisco. And so a day before that, so 2 days before the league got shut down, our head coach at the time, Doc Rivers, texted our entire group and our entire travel party saying, hey, San Francisco is right now the city that's been most affected by the coronavirus pandemic. Wasn't a pandemic yet, so the coronavirus virus. And as a result, we don't want you leaving the hotel room. Our objective is go in, get a win, and get out. No extra side business. Don't leave. Don't go anywhere. Don't go to dinner. Don't do any of this. There will be dinner for you in the hotel. Go to the team room to get it. There will be lunch for you the next day. We're going to go to shoot around, but don't go anywhere other than the team bus. So very strict. And this was before most of the rest of the league was really starting to buckle down like that. And this was the first time we had already heard of from our prior road trip, our more recent road trip of, hey, be careful. If somebody tries to hand you something, for the players, they were saying if somebody tries to have you sign something, use your own pen. We're going to have pens for you. So they were already starting to do some things to try to, I guess, level the playing field, and certainly giving hand sanitizer, all that stuff. So we went in, we got the win, and we left. And we got back to LA that night, and I started getting ready for our next game, which was against the Brooklyn Nets, my childhood team, the team my dad's worked for now 26 years. We hadn't played them yet, so I was super excited. It was a game I was looking forward to all year. And so I started getting ready for it. I woke up the next day, did a little bit of work, and did my normal routine of going X, Y, or Z, running errands, going to grab lunch, going to get food for the apartment. And I was at the gym in my building, my apartment building, when Rudy Gobert tested positive, and I started getting alerts on my phone as I'm in the middle of my workout. So I quickly stopped, ran back upstairs, turned on the TV, and I just sat there for hours and watched everything unfold. And it was crazy. I didn't hear anything specific for a little bit, but the team was pretty good about keeping on top of everything. And like I said, they were on top of it pretty early. So we had already been following certain protocols, and then it just got stricter and stricter from there. So crazy, something I'll never forget, and live through it. It's something that I'll be able to tell my grandkids one day. Yeah, I was a part of it.
What were some of the emotions you felt like, even going back to whenever you guys were in San Francisco? Did you ever have that kind of doubt in the back of your mind? Like, wait a minute, we might not be able to finish this season kind of on the track that we anticipated?
No, none of us felt that way at the time. I don't think anybody around the league felt that way until the Gobert news, and then it started snowballing from there. But at the time, the thing we were worried about is maybe we're not going to have fans for a little while, because the Warriors the next day were supposed to play the Brooklyn Nets. So the Nets were going to they had played the Lakers that same night that we played them. And then they were scheduled, they went to San Francisco, flew right after the game in LA, San Francisco. So they were there. They were supposed to play the Warriors the following day with 0 fans, or maybe it was that day. I don't remember the exact timing, but that was supposed to be the first game that had no fans in it. And everybody was making a big deal of that at the time. And I remember even around Chase Center, people were murmuring and talking about this craziness that was coming and all that. And nobody really understood how big of a deal it actually was quite yet. And that was true with the entire country. And so once everything got figured out to the magnitude of the situation, then it all made sense. And the reality hit of, okay, we got to take care of person first, then worry about sport. And once that set in, Adam Silver, who I think is the best commissioner in all of sports, and I think he's proven that further during this pandemic, he was on top of it and he was ready to figure things out the best way possible. And I think he did exactly that.
Obviously, when the NBA started to restart, was a lot of excitement, not only from a fan perspective, but I guess for you, I was obviously from a broadcaster perspective. Did you get a chance to go down to Orlando, or did you have to call games from an outside station? How did that all work out for you going into the back end, or pretty much the super second half of the season?
Yeah, they didn't want me in Orlando. They said no Eagle in particular. No. He can't come in here. No, what happened was the national broadcasters they had in, but they were basically in their own version of a bubble, and they had their own spaces in the arena. So they couldn't come within a certain amount of distance of the players or the coaches or the people that were in zone 1 or the gold zone. I don't remember what exactly they were calling each one. For the local broadcasters, we had to stay within our markets for the most part and do games a variety of ways. So it really depended on the team and how they set everything up. So, for example, I know the Nets, because I have at least knowledge of their situation, they were calling games from Barclays Center, from where their games actually are, because it was easy to feed that line through to that site. For us, I was calling games from Fox Sports West Studios, downtown Los Angeles. So easy commute for me, like 15 minutes from my apartment. I drive up. I had a very small space, but it was good. It was exactly what I needed. I had to get a little portable fan because it was a sauna in there. And the first few games I did, I think I sweat my body weight out. So I stopped wearing suits. I started wearing comfortable clothes, and I got a little fan, and I had 2 computer-sized monitors, and that's how I had to call the game. But I had no control over what pictures I was seeing. I had no control over angles. There were times they would cut to maybe a replay or to a different close-up of somebody on a bench, and the play's still going on, and I'm calling it for radio, so I need to know what's happening, but I don't. So you have to almost stall until you can get back and then figure things out as you go. So it was a process, but once I got a couple under my belts, it just became second nature, like calling any other game. And the hope is that eventually we can return to the way that we had been in the past, because that's one of the best parts about the job, is being in that environment and feeling the energy and being around and going to practices and shoot arounds and talking to players and coaches, etc. So eventually the goal is to get back to that, but we understand that this is how it has to be done right now, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Was there
No.
anything that you liked about that instead of actually going to the stadium? I know obviously all of us rather be at the place where the game is happening, but was there any advantages of, not being there, or just something that you found to enjoy in particular?
It's hard. I would say it's hard. There are fewer advantages to doing it in a remote location. All the advantages come when you're there. You can feel, you can anticipate when something's happening. You get a full view of the court, so you can see things develop. You can see things going on the bench. So if somebody's arguing with somebody else, you can see that. You can report on that. Things like that, and feeding off crowd, obviously. And my favorite thing about being able to be on the road is seeing all these different cities and going to all these different places and seeing all these different people, of relationships that I've created now in just year 1 alone, of people that I've run into on the road. So missing out on that stuff, not fun. But I guess the good thing is obviously being able to just do the games is good, and having games is good. But the other one would be the fact that I knew we had our crew that was in the building, and so we were seeing them every few days and catching up and just being around them consistently, and that's always good. So I'd say that's the one advantage, and being able to sleep, I guess, in my own bed. But other than that, I would say every broadcaster would always prefer to be at site instead of in a studio, but take what I can take.
No, I think that all of us were kind of holding our breaths as more and more teams were entering the bubble. Like, can this pop? Will it actually hold? When did that sense of kind of certainty that the season would start? When did you get that feeling that, okay, we might actually be able to play this out and we'll be able to call games again?
I would say about midway through the shutdown months. So shutdown early to mid-March. So let's say a month or 2 in, so it would be April, May. I would say around May, the Clippers had Adam Silver come on a company-wide Zoom for us, and he basically laid out the plan. And once I heard him talking about all the options that they exhausted, all the research they did, all the people they talked to, and just how thorough they were, it gave me a sense of security of not only are they going to be able to start, but they're going to pull this off perfectly. He just, everything he laid out, I said, he's thought of every possible outcome. He's thought of everything. And once I had that info, I said, okay, it's going to happen at some point. It's just a matter of when and how I'm going to be calling these games. And I said, whatever it is, I'll follow suit. So that was the moment to me when I heard it directly from him in a semi behind closed doors, I guess, type of situation where I thought, okay, yeah, they've got this. As long as this guy's in charge, they're going to be okay.
Obviously, season's over. Lakers win the championship, but obviously for you and your job, that means you're no longer calling basketball games. So question is, what are you doing now? And I did a little research just to be sure. Working with the Tennis Channel, if that's correct?
Yes. I've been really fortunate. The Clippers have allowed me to do work outside of just the Clippers as long as it doesn't coincide with them, which is incredibly gracious and fair. And I've been blessed to be able to do it. So Tennis Channel they reached out to me real early. They actually reached out to me, I believe, before the Clippers offered me my position, trying to gauge my interest. And once I knew that I was going to be in LA with the Clippers because Tennis Channel is based out here, I said, yeah. I was always been a tennis fan. I'd love to do it. And so I did a little bit last year. And then once the tennis stuff started coming back, they had exhibitions and things that were being played before the NBA restarted. So I actually did some of that before the NBA. I did a couple of events over in Croatia and Serbia, not actually going. I do them out of a studio in LA. I'm not flying to Croatia and Serbia or to Berlin or some of these other places that we did. So I had done a couple months leading into the NBA restart, and they had reached out to me in Tennis Channel and basically said, hey, if the Clippers don't advance to a certain round, would you be willing and would you want to come to Paris with us for the French Open? And I was like, yeah. We all thought that the Clippers would keep advancing. And so they said, we know it's a long shot, but we want to almost just have you ready to go. I said, okay. And sure enough, the second round was the cutoff. If they had gotten past that second round, I would have been back in LA calling games for the Clippers, but at least I had a decent enough consolation prize that I got to go to Paris and call some French Open action. So that was really cool. And that was a first time experience. And then I actually just wrapped up last 14 days there. So they've kept me busy. Let's just keep it that way. They've kept me busy since the end of the NBA. I do some stuff for SiriusXM as well. So I try to keep my mind preoccupied as much as possible.
One of the lucky few to benefit from the Clippers being knocked out that early. I wish that was.
I would have been plenty beneficial if they had kept going. I would have been plenty in a good spot. True. So I was good either way. It ended up being a win-win for me, but I certainly would have preferred, as much as I love going to Paris, I would have preferred for the Clippers to keep on rolling.
Now, of course, we're moving into next season. It might be a little bit of a later start date. You would know a little bit before us. Obviously, you got a little bit more of an inside track. So do you know anything about potential start dates? I know we've heard Christmas, we've heard January, players potentially sitting out because it's too early of a start. What do you know about that?
Yeah, guys, it's hard. It's really hard to figure out exactly what's going to happen. I think we'll have an answer in the next week or so, but there's no clear-cut answer at the moment. And there are two sides that believe in two different things at this point. The key to me is, okay, if you want to start by Christmas, that's okay. You just have to understand that a lot of this is going to have to happen very quickly because the draft is coming up in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So you've got the draft, but then you've got to get free agency in. They're saying they're going to start training camps December 1st, but they're also starting free agency right around December 1st. So are you giving guys enough time to acclimate to their new teams, their new rosters before playing in a regular season game? And that's important. So that's something I feel like that hasn't been talked about a whole lot. But again, I trust the NBA to make the right decision. The reason Adam Silver's been so great is because he's made it a true partnership between the owners and the players. He's made that a marriage and not necessarily a parent and child as it had been in the past. And so when you've got that and you've got everybody's voice heard, you know that you're going to come out with the correct outcome for the greater good of the mass, not necessarily for everybody, but for the masses. Mm-hmm. And that's really what's most important here. And so as long as they can come to a decision collectively, I trust their decision. I trust Adam Silver. I trust the team owners, and I trust the players to go out and do what's best for everybody.
So obviously the start date's a question mark. We also don't know whether or not fans in any capacity, if they're going to be allowed in the stadium, but do you know if you will be allowed or in the stadium, or are you still going to be kind of confined to that little sauna down in downtown LA?
Yeah, my sauna closet. It's always funny when you're calling games out of the little space and you're almost in your little bubble yourself. That was me. I had a mini bubble. Just me, though. I was population 1. But I don't know. I have no info. And I don't think I will until there's a concrete plan in place. Once there's a concrete plan in place, I would assume that they'll start figuring out some of those minute details. But I was telling people this when they would ask me during the shutdown, are you going to be in the bubble, when they had established that there would be? I said, the NBA has 100 things on their list right now. Number 101 on that list is, hey, what about the radio broadcasters? Like I'm the last thing on Adam Silver's mind right now. So whatever it is, it'll be, and I'll adapt and I'll have fun with it and I'll enjoy it. I'm just going to be happy to have Clipper basketball back on the airwaves.
All right, no, this is a big question here. All right, and I want you to dig deep here.
Talked about
this
it a
one.
lot.
So obviously the Clippers, they did not live up to the expectations that a lot of people expected them to be this season. You know, Dane and Connor both projected them to win the NBA championships. We made our brackets, and that was their pick. So I think you might be able to answer this question maybe even a little bit more than you would, given a lot of things that's changed with the Clippers organization just in recent weeks. What do you think was the downfall of this team in the playoffs?
I think what we really across the entire NBA, different teams reacted differently to the bubble. That's definitely where you've got to start. Look at the 2 teams that got through, especially Miami. That's a team that was a group that was built for this type of experience. You never build your team thinking, hey, what if we have a global pandemic? How is our team going to react that way? But for some reason, Miami just built the perfect roster to deal with it. Mentally, they're tough. Physically, they're tough. They banded together as a group, and they figured it out. And the bubble environment, I did talk to a lot of people about that, was tough. It just was. Especially, you have to consider it this way. If you're a player and you have a tough game, especially in a playoff moment, in a key moment, you have a rough game, usually you get to go home, let's say, to your wife and to your kids or to somebody that can lift your spirits or take your mind off of it. Now, these players are going back to a hotel room where they're sitting alone with their thoughts. And sometimes it's 1, 2 in the morning. I know Doc Rivers told me that after those games, because they were so late for them, they were 9 o'clock starts Eastern. For me in LA and for us, it was good because it was a 6 o'clock start. It was perfect for us. But for them on the East Coast, they weren't finishing those games until, let's say, midnight, a little bit after. And he said he wasn't going to sleep after games until 4 or 5 in the morning. So you're already dealing with just a completely shifted clock, and the routines that you're normally in are completely out of whack. And so I think that's the start for a lot of teams. We saw how different players and different teams and different personnel all responded differently to the bubble atmosphere. So that's one thing, and it's not necessarily an excuse. It's more so just, okay, yeah, this is different. This is something we haven't seen, and so we were expecting different people to react the way that they did. For the Clippers, I think they got a little bit unlucky, because in terms of their players, not necessarily, I'm not talking about games. I'm not talking about in the series. I'm talking about the start of the bubble. So they had 3 players that dealt with loss right off the bat. They had 3 players prior to that who dealt with COVID. And so 3 players coming back from COVID, Ivica Zubac, Landry Shamet, and Marcus Morris. 2 of those 3 looked pretty normal, but Landry, I'm not sure quite got there. And he also was dealing with injury once he got back to the bubble, because he wasn't fully conditioned as a result of having COVID as long as he did. He was dealing with that for about 3 weeks. So that's one thing. And then you go back to the fact that they got there, and before the bubble, before the shutdown, the Clippers were one of the hottest teams in the league. They won, I think, 9 of 10 games. The only loss was to the Lakers in that afternoon Sunday showdown. And if we're being honest, I think the Clippers, after winning the first 2 matchups against the Lakers, Doc Rivers was holding some of those cards for the playoffs. If you look at the 4th quarter of that game and talking to him a little bit, I think he held back a little bit. He didn't quite go fully in for the jugular in that game, which I understand. And again, that's a credit to the Lakers still for going out and winning. And everything's a credit to the Lakers for the way that they've handled themselves through this entire experience. But for the Clippers, they thought, hey, we rounded a corner. We have our full health now. Everybody was starting to play well together. They get to the bubble. They're already dealing with those 3 guys who had COVID. And then Montrezl Harrell's grandma ends up passing away. This is somebody in Montrezl Harrell who people were asking, well, what's wrong with Montrezl? Well, Montrezl Harrell is somebody who plays 24/7, 365 days a year. Off-season hits, he's playing pro-ams all across the country. He's playing pickup 5-on-5 every day. He's working with his trainer every day. He is a rhythm player, always in rhythm all the time, 12 months a year. So for 4 months, he was told you can't play anywhere. You've got to sit. That's not good for the player and the type of player that he is. Then he gets back, and I don't know what type of shape he was in, but I can't imagine based on somebody the way that he normally plays, it was what he's normally accustomed to. Then he leaves the bubble for another month plus. So that can't help. That didn't help, considering his first game was quite literally in the playoffs against the Dallas Mavericks. Then you've got Patrick Beverley, who's his situation, I don't think it's fully public, but it was rough for him. And he handled it. He got back home to Chicago for a few days, came back, then he gets hurt. So that was a whole situation. And then you've got the Lou Williams situation, which everybody's got an opinion on. Everybody likes to talk about. All I know is Lou was there to win. And Lou is somebody who realizes the magnitude of the situation that he's in, where his career is starting to wind down. He's not necessarily on the up anymore. He's either at the apex or starting that downgrade. And he knows that. He knows that he's only got a few years left. So he was somebody who was really locked in and trying to do everything he could to help this team win. We saw some games during the postseason where he played better defense than I've seen him play in years. The problem was and really all those guys weren't quite in the shape that they were before the shutdown. And we saw that towards the end of that Denver series, and certainly in Game 7, they had no legs, and it just came back to bite them. But they put themselves in a really good position moving forward. Jerry West told me several times this year, this window for this team is a minimum of 5 years. And he's totally right based on the ages of the guys that they have. They believe that PG and Kawhi are there for the long haul. I think the coaching staff they've put together is perfect and exactly what this team needs. And the best part about the Clippers organization is they've got, in my estimation, and I'm biased, but they've got the best owner in sports. Steve Ballmer will literally anything to make sure his team is winning. Every decision he makes is with winning in mind. And so he's willing to pay any price. He's willing to do whatever it takes to put his team in the best position to be successful. And that included making the coaching changes. And as much as I love Doc Rivers, and I truly do love him, and he was great to me, they felt mutually, and Doc also felt like it was time to move on. Steve felt like it was time to move on. And so Steve did a thorough search to make sure he was getting all the right people, not just at the head coaching position, but with the assistant coaches as well. So that gives me a sense of security, and it should for all of Clipper Nation of, you know what, as long as this guy's there, you're always going to be in it. You're always going to have a chance. So still a lot of optimism over here.
Now, obviously, in any sport with the salary cap, it's hard to run it back. And you mentioned like Harrell was thrown out of rhythm, Shamit and a couple other players catching COVID. And unfortunately, like they weren't really at 100%, even when they finally got back on the court in the playoffs. But Harrell and Marcus Morris are both key free agents. Do you anticipate them trying to just opening up the vault to keep them? Or do you think that they can look into other free agent options to potentially replace them? Because Harrell, obviously coming off a 6th man of the year, he might get paid elsewhere and might outprice himself for LA.
Yeah, I think the other thing I will say, I know I just talked about how great Steve is. Another great thing he's done is really tool up that front office. And Lawrence Frank, who won Executive of the Year for good measure, is someone who's made just correct decision after correct decision in formulating this team and getting them to this position from where they were towards the end of the Lob City era. It just seemed like, how could you possibly now pivot without tanking? And they did. They had 1 year they missed the playoffs, and they were right back in it, winning 48 games last year without an all-star on the team. And they woo Kawhi Leonard and Paul George over to LA. So I would say, more than anything else, I trust every decision they're going to make, because we looked at the trades they made in the past, and in the moment, people are like, what are the Clippers doing? Why would you trade Chris Paul and get all those guys back? Why would you trade Blake Griffin? Why would you trade Tobias Harris? Like, those were the guys that were leading you, and look at what they've gotten in return. It's remarkable. So whatever they decide to do is going to be the right decision for the team. the reason why I feel confident no matter what is, again, Steve can pay any price. So he can pay into the luxury tax because he has the funds and the means to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to bring both those guys back. I have no information. I think they probably want them back. Certainly, Montrezl Harrell has done a whole lot to bring this team to where they are right now. And Marcus Morris, they loved what he did for them. They loved his intensity. They loved his two-way ability. So I think both those guys they'd love to have back, but I guess we're going to find out. And I think the first and most important issue at hand is figuring out what the season is going to look like first, and then they'll deal with that free agency stuff second. So we'll see. I think time will tell, but I would say there are no options that are off the table with this team. They're always looking to improve the roster no matter what, and they're always evaluating, and that's why I trust them, because they're thorough.
You just mentioned their front office, and certainly there's going to be some other teams interested in guys like Montrezl Harrell and Marcus Morris, but there have been some rumors and some other teams that the Clippers are interested in a guy like Rajon Rondo, a guy that was so instrumental in the Lakers winning it all this year. If he goes to the Clippers, is he a guy that you really think could push them to a championship level?
Yeah, sure. I think the Clippers, people need to understand when a season ends the way that their season did, a lot of times people panic and they think, whoa, what happened here? The Clippers were still one of the best teams in the NBA this year. If you go through before the bubble, they were the second best team in the Western Conference. They were the third best team or so, third or fourth based on record in the NBA, and they were one of the clear-cut favorites to win it all. So it's not that you have to really rock the boat big time and figure out ways, hey, how can we completely shift this roster around? They're a roster that's maybe one or two pieces away from taking that final step. And maybe that's the coaching staff. Maybe that's the changes they've already made in-house. Could be. Maybe it is a guy like Rondo who has championship pedigree in two spots now and is one of the most impressive basketball minds in the history of the sport. Very, very possible that he could be somebody who takes them from point A to point B and just that small baby step they need to take just to get over that hump. It's very possible, but you won't really know until you see it out on the court. And Rondo's somebody especially who's geared for postseason. We saw it again this year where regular season, he's going to give you what he gives you. He's a good mentor to have in terms of a basketball mind, but you really want him when the postseason comes around because that's when he shines the brightest. So if you can bring somebody like that who you know is going to deliver in big moments, I am always in favor of doing that because the big moments are where you make your money. And the Clippers clearly could use that one extra push in some of those bigger moments, someone who can just steady the ship in those contentious moments of a series. So it's possible. I don't think it's a bad signing if they do it, but I trust Lawrence Frank in his gut. I trust Michael Winger, or GM. I trust Trent Redden and Mark Hughes. I trust the entire front office to make the right choice.
And no, I laugh a little bit because you mentioned the word panic, and I think we have two panickers also on this Zoom call, just a little bit. Maybe the one wearing the plaid shirt, but definitely panickers over there. I didn't panic as much. I definitely have them ready to go next season, but I think we have some
common.
panickers.
The panic is common, man. That's all I'm saying. I see it all over Twitter. I think people need to take a step back and realize that a lot of times this doesn't happen overnight. The Lakers this year are one of the first artificially built, so it wasn't homegrown champions in a long time.
Yeah,
if you really think about it, because Toronto, aside from bringing Kawhi in, sure, Kyle Lowry wasn't drafted there, but he was built there. Siakam was drafted, Van Vliet was drafted, some of those other guys that Norman Powell, OG Anunoby, they were all homegrown people. Golden State, obviously, and Steph and Clay and Draymond, homegrown. So even you can go back to the Miami and Boston. They had at least one of their stars was homegrown. But in LA this year, LeBron was not homegrown. Anthony Davis was not homegrown. They acquired those guys, and they made it work. And that's a huge credit to LeBron James and his leadership, and it's a huge credit to everything surrounding that organization. But more often than not, it takes more than just 1 year to make it work. And I think that's the process the Clippers are sorting through right now. But to panic and hit that panic button right away is short-sighted, in my opinion.
You're making Dane tick a little bit. It seems
Make him switch. I'm not the biggest panicker on this show by any means. I will say, like I said, Jaden said earlier in the show, I picked the Clippers to win it all. But patience Patience is key, and I think you're teaching us that. But Connor, you can go ahead with the next question.
Yeah, I'll let that homegrown comment kind of slide because I'm not going to tolerate any Alex Caruso disrespect on this
Listen,
show.
I'm a huge Caruso guy. I'm
Yeah.
a big Caruso supporter. The Clippers actually were really interested in him when he came out of college, and they were this close to actually making the deal work. And at the last second, he kind of shifted, and it didn't work out for them. But they were all in on the Caruso stuff early, and I'm a big fan. Like, I'm just glad that people are finally starting to realize that he's an actual impressive role player. He's not just a meme guy. Like, the fact that he goes out there and he does things for your team that help you win. The fact that people finally realize that is important to me, because there are a lot of guys out there like Brian Scalabrine early in his career with the Nets, and even at points with the Celtics was the same type of thing. People looked at him because he was this tall ginger guy that he couldn't play. Dude was a very solid role player for a good stretch of time in the NBA. And so I'm glad that Caruso's getting his due.
Yeah, so back to how you keep mentioning how that the Clippers, they need that like just one big push, whether that's a player, but also that could come in the form of a coach. And we've talked about how they mutually moved on from Doc Rivers. And I know you were a fan of the Ty Lue hiring. Do you think that big push could just be the hiring and the impact on the bench now?
It's very possible. We've seen all you have to do. I guess Toronto's not a great example because they also went out and got Kawhi, but Nick Nurse completely shifted the way that team played, completely shifted the way the makeup of them. And so now continue it into this year. And Nick Nurse had them playing at an extraordinarily high level. So I do think that the coach can make a huge difference. Or a better example would be Golden State, where Mark Jackson took the Golden State Warriors to the second round a couple years. They decided, you know what? I think we've reached our peak with this guy. Let's try somebody else. And Steve Kerr unlocked the potential of that dynasty. So it is most certainly possible that could be the case right here as well. Tyronn Lue is a fantastic coach. We are extremely fortunate to have him, and his staff is off the charts good. They filled every hole within the staff perfectly. And that's a credit to not just Tyronn Lue, but to Steve Ballmer and to Lawrence Frank and to everybody involved in that search. And so when you look at what they're bringing in, not just T. Lue, but everything else around him, it should make any Clipper fan excited for what they're going to do in the product and what it's going to look like out on the court versus what it did this year. The offense should be a little faster. They should be shooting a bunch more threes than they did this past year. And when you've got guys like Paul George, who, if you look at his numbers in terms of three-point shooting, are ridiculous for his size, for his skill set, and Landry Shamet, if they can start running plays directly for him and turn him into what T. Lue had in Cleveland, where he had J.R. Smith and then he had Kyle Korver, and they would run specific plays for those two, I think Shamet could play a similar role. And if you get him in rhythm, it makes this team that much more dangerous. And the guy that they might be most excited about on the entire roster, guys like Kawhi and Paul, no. The guy they're most excited about would be Ivica Zubac and all the strides he's already taken at 23 years old. They believe he has all-star potential, and if you just look at his trajectory already in the league, you can see exactly why. So put all those pieces together and a fresh perspective from Tyronn Lue and company, we'll see what it creates. The equation is still in the balance.
No, you're hurting me as a Laker guy. I mentioned Zubac. I mean, I really liked him. A little questionable on that trade a few years ago, but yes, a very talented player. And moving away from the Clippers a little bit, one of the crazy things I bet about being an NBA radio guy is that you get to see so many talented players play up close every other night. So who were a couple players outside the Clippers that you didn't know were that good, but once you saw them play, you're like, wow.
First one right off the bat is Ja Morant. And I guess nobody really knew he was that good. But the first time we played them in Memphis, or was it? Yes, it was in Memphis. And he didn't even play that well. And I was still blown away by how great he was and how composed he was down the stretch. Then they came to LA the second time, and they ran us out of the building. And it was all because of him. He set the tone early. That was the game he completely broke Jerome Robinson's ankles and hit a three up on the right wing. He's the guy to me where I walked away thinking, man, this guy's special. Luka Doncic is an obvious answer, but when you see him and consistently see him, there are so many superlatives that can be described for him. And I try to steer clear of all of them because I think he's only scratching the surface, which is absolutely absurd to think. to me, he's going to be MVP next year. I'd be surprised if he doesn't win it. I just think he's in the perfect position to do it. I think he's already taken the necessary steps to get to that level. So now it's just about blowing away the rest of the league consistently on a singular year. And I think he's going to do that. So if you wanted my MVP pick, if you guys wanted any advice, he's the guy. I think he's the odds-on favorite, but
Yes, he is.
He's going to win it. I really feel pretty confident of that fact. Those two for sure. I'm trying to think of anybody else. I mean, they're the obvious ones, the LeBron Jameses of the world. Just seeing that physicality, that athleticism, seeing it, especially at the age that he is, up close and personal is ridiculous. So always going to say those. The fact that I get to watch and call Kawhi Leonard on any given night, he's among my favorite players that I've ever watched, and I just love seeing how he operates on the court. It's surgical every time he's out there, and he can dominate. It just seems like, for the most part, everybody has off nights, and he is included. But generally, through the majority of a season, there's a switch that he can just flip and take over a game on command. And we saw that for the majority of this season. Obviously, Game 7 was an exception and disappointing, and I think he's disappointed. I think he is ready to prove that it was a one-off and it wasn't what he has consistently shown so far. But I love watching him. He's just so much fun if you're a basketball junkie like me. If you're somebody who just likes watching the art of the game, Paul George is somebody more you'll probably enjoy because he's smooth. He's a smooth operator on the court. He's silky. He does things like that. But Kawhi, if you're a basketball junkie and you appreciate somebody picking apart the game mentally and then physically going out and basically putting that scouting report to work every night, Kawhi's your guy. So the two names I would say are Ja and Luka, and I'm still building up that. I'm trying to think if there was anybody else. Tyler Hero, I wasn't as impressed as everybody. I think he's very good.
Did you get to see Zion?
I did. I saw Zion in college.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Also, you probably saw him.
I actually called the
the
Syracuse Duke game at Cameron Indoor, where Duke was ranked number 1 in the country, and Syracuse won. Yes, Syracuse won, and Zion had this ridiculous game. Every time they played Syracuse, so I saw him 4 times in college, and I walked away thinking, whoa, this dude is off the charts. And it wasn't just the physicality and the athleticism. It wasn't just how big and strong he was. It was his IQ. His basketball IQ is very high, especially in college, at least on the defensive end. Now, I don't think he was ever quite 100% this year. And so I'm hoping that this offseason gives him time to recover, because if he is at 100%, he's a superstar in this league. No question about it. And so I got to see him in person a bunch of times at Duke. Never in person this year, but we did a game when they were in the bubble, and he didn't play great. The Clippers did a good job defensively on him. But he's somebody who's just wildly impressive because he's so different from everybody else. And if he can start hitting that jump shot consistently, I'm not sure if he can, but if he finds a way to get at least close, look out. He's as dangerous as anybody in the league.
Mm-hmm. So just circling back to Steve Ballmer, you mentioned how he is so willing to do anything to win. He's also probably the most enthusiastic owner in the NBA, and that's kind of putting it lightly. Have you been able to meet him, and is his energy in person as high as it looks like on TV?
Yeah, so I had to interview with Steve for the job. So I interviewed with the Clippers first. That was 1 week. And then the next week, I got a message from my agent saying, hey, Steve Ballmer wants to meet you in Seattle. Keep in mind, I was still a senior in college at the time. So I was at Syracuse, and I had to fly across the country to LA at first, take a red eye back. Then I had to fly across the country to Seattle. And after the interview, take a red eye back again, because I had to get back for finals, which you guys know all too well. But which I was like, can I get an excuse?
Yeah,
that's a great thing to leave for. I was about to final for that real quick.
The whole point of college about getting a job. Like, I think this is a good excuse, right? They're like, no, that's not how it works. It's like, all right. So, but I got to interview with Steve, and I went in hearing how great a guy he is, hearing and seeing all that enthusiasm. And I got there, and I sat down and waited for him. He comes in right at the time we were supposed to meet. Let's say it was 1:30. I got in there at 1:28. At 1:30 on the dot, he walks in, and he sits down, and everything you see is exactly what you get. He is genuinely all of it. Now, in a more tame setting when it's a two-person conversation. But, for example, when I asked him at one point, well, what are you looking for in your team broadcaster? His initial answer, didn't have to think, within a split second, was somebody who's hardcore. And I said, I can do that. You know, I can be hardcore. I said, maybe not like going down a half pipe or something like that, but I can do some stuff. But he, the thing that stands out more than anything about Steve is he's always the smartest person in the room. I can guarantee you that. But if you didn't know who he was or you didn't know him, you'd never know in general, because he doesn't carry himself that way. He wants this to be a 50-50 discussion when he's talking to you. So he would ask me questions about, hey, well, what were you learning in school about this subject? What were you learning about the future of broadcasting? And he genuinely wanted to know those answers. And if I didn't agree with him on something, he wanted me to tell him I didn't agree with him on something, which is what I did. So it was all awesome. He's awesome. For example, also, every time I'm at Staples Center before a game and I see him in the hall, I'll say, hey, Steve. He says, hey, Noah, how are you? But it's not just with me. That's with every employee. He knows everyone's names. He doesn't have to do that. I mean, he's Steve Ballmer. He has $70 billion to his name, but he does it because he's genuinely an awesome dude. And him and his wife, Connie, do so much for the LA community, for the Seattle community, for Detroit community where he's from. This is a guy who, as mentioned, has all that money, more money than he knows what to do with, and will only ever drive Ford cars because his dad worked for Ford growing up, and they were part of a lower middle class, and he has too much loyalty to that company to ever go away. That's all you need to know about the type of person he is. And as mentioned, he wants to win more than anything else. I asked him why he owns a team, and he was very frank about it. He said, I saw some of my friends that own teams, people that I'd worked with in the past, and I'm a huge sports guy, so I always just wanted to be around more than anything else. And so he thought about football or basketball and eventually decided to go on the NBA route because he felt he could have his arms around the team a little bit more and be more hands-on with them. But despite being a hands-on owner, he lets everybody do exactly what they were hired to do. So he hires someone in the role and he trusts that person to do the role at the highest of levels. So he's just so special because you don't get that very often at that level of success. But you do with Steve Ballmer. What you see is exactly what you get.
No, wait 1 second, because my room is slowly turning into a dark cave, and I'm looking at my screen, and it's like, you know what? Maybe I should lift up the shade. I'm in Queens, so it makes things a little tough because it gets dark here now quick.
What part of Queens?
I'm in Flushing, Kew Gardens.
Okay. My dad's from Forest Hills, so
I see Forest Hills from my window. So that's how it goes.
So we're all in different parts of the. Because Ithaca College is actually remote this semester, so we're all in different parts of home. So it's been a little weird, but we're.
Are you guys all Northeast though?
Yeah. Dane's the upstate New York Laker fan. I'm the Northwest PA OKC fan. So it all checks out.
He couldn't be more upstate. He's by like Oswego, Lake Ontario.
It's like right on Lake Ontario.
He's kissing the lake.
It's about 45 minutes, like an hour north of Cuse.
Yeah, no, I know where that is. I'm aware. Yeah.
He couldn't be more north. That's what I say. Yeah, Laker fan. Go figure,
Canada.
right?
Well, I'm kind of near Canada, but not that.
Go
Yeah,
figure.
I mean, he's ready to go to Toronto if necessary. I get it.
All right, Jake, continue.
Yes, I will continue. So, 23 years old. I'm 19. I think Dane's 19. We're all in the relatively same age. Different situation here, though. We're doing dribbling around. You're calling play-by-play for the Clippers. So how does it feel being in a work environment where I think I could say without a shadow of a doubt, you're the youngest guy there in that play-by-play role? You know, I think that's very fair to say. So how does it feel to be in that position?
Yeah, it's funny because it was my birthday about midway through the season in December, second week of December, and we were actually in Toronto, ironically enough, on my birthday. But I remember somebody on the plane, once someone found out it was my birthday, they said, "Oh, happy birthday. You're only 1 year less younger than everybody else." Like, it was another congrats on still being the youngest one here. But it's cool. What I told the Clippers when I interviewed with them was I think my strength in being young, but having an old soul, which I definitely do. I'm somebody who has a great appreciation for 70s, 80s, and 90s and all that stuff. With that, and having seen all those movies and TV shows and music and all of it, and being able to reference it at a moment's notice, I felt it gave me an advantage of being able to appeal to both an older generation and a younger generation. So the way I described it to them was I might be in the middle of a call and be able to quote a line from the movie Airplane, but the next bucket I can quote the most recent Drake album, something around those. So I can hit both sides of the spectrum. And I think that's true with relationships around the organization as well, where guys understand, hey, okay, he knows all the same stuff we know. He watched all the same stuff we watched. So it's an instant connection of okay, yeah, he's all good. The other thing that helps me in terms of definitely the player relationships is the coaches' relationships. So Doc Rivers was welcoming of me, and that was great. But guys like Sam Cassell, who's an assistant with us, who played for the Nets, and my dad was the broadcaster when he played for the Nets. And so he knew my dad and still does know my dad very well. And my dad at the time was working with Bill Raftery. So the first plane I ever was on for the Clippers was for our training camp in Hawaii, which, I mean, I couldn't be more upset that was the first assignment I had. They were like, we're going to Hawaii. I go, no, screw you. Like, I was like, I quit. It was like, are you serious? I'm like, I'm already pumped to get this job. They're like, yeah, we're going to Honolulu. I'm like, okay. But anyway, I was on the plane and I was sitting alone towards the back. I hadn't met many people yet, and I was just trying to mind my own business. And Sam Cassell comes sauntering back towards the back of the plane down the aisle. And out of nowhere, I just hear, "No Eagle." And I'm like, what? And he's like, man, your dad and Bill Raftery, they some crazy, and I'm not going to finish this. And that's how I met Sam. And he goes, you like them? I'm like, yeah, I'm like them. He goes, all right. And that was it. And so then every time Sam saw me, all I hear is, "No Eagle." And I'm like, huh? And so he's literally early in the season talking in a deep conversation with Paul George. And I'm walking past to leave the shoot around. And in the middle of his sentence, it was like a weird, bizarro radar where he just snapped. He was like, "No Eagle." And Paul George is like, what's going on here? But that was enough now for PG next time he sees me to trust me. Or Kawhi, when I got to know his strength coach, he lives in my apartment building, his strength coach who he's had since San Diego State. And so I got to know him. So now he sees me with that guy, or he sees me with Sam or T. Lou or Doc, and he says, okay, I know him. So that now when I had to interview him at All-Star, he was comfortable with me because he's seen me around. So I try not to get in people's way, no matter the position. I try to be friendly no matter what, and I let those things happen organically. And if you just give it time, always finds a way to work out.
What's it like interviewing a player like Kawhi? Because I don't think there's really anyone in the NBA with a personality like him. And that's not a criticism at all, because he's mastered that kind of he's mastered that trait. But what's it like just going into that interview? What are you trying to get out of him, knowing how he talks and everything?
I think you have to hit on personal experience with him, and you have to bring back the research you've done that you have that other people maybe don't. So for me, I was the first person who got the first one-on-one interview post All-Star game, because I worked for the Clippers and it just worked out that way. And there's a whole crazy story behind that of how that happened, and we can get into it if you guys are interested. But basically what I was focusing on for him winning All-Star MVP was the trophy was named after Kobe. And I have the knowledge that Kawhi and Kobe were very, very close. And I had knowledge of just how close they were. And I had knowledge of specific examples of why they were close. And so I could draw on those experiences to try to listen and answer out of him about that. And felt like we got a decent answer about him from there. So some of the times you have to go generic, and he knows that. And I think he feels he's improved. He has, and he's a good dude. I think that people have to understand that at the end of the day, he truly is a fun guy, and his teammates love him. That's anywhere you go. If you just go back, some people might say, yeah, he's a little bit of a different dude, but we love him, and he makes us crack up, and this and that and that. Kyle Lowry and Serge Ibaka, they love that dude. They still do to this day. And everybody so far with the Clippers that I've been around, they seem to really connect with him, and he's easy to be around for them. So I think when you know all that going in, you don't psych yourself out too much. The one thing that really helped me in terms of interviewing somebody like that was being in Syracuse with Jim Boeheim. Because if you didn't ask Jim Boeheim a good question, you were going to get crushed. And so that was good training for that next step now to deal with a player like Kawhi.
Speaking of Kawhi, Connor, I just noticed the shirt you're wearing. I'm not sure. He's got the board man.
Boardman gets paid.
Boards get
I'm
paid.
wearing
Boardman gets paid.
Bro, I like this. It's a good West Coast connection right now, even though you're back east.
Yeah,
But yes,
you know, the
Boardman-
funny thing was I was the biggest panicker on the show for the Clippers. Like I have them kind of like we did our power rankings, I think 2 episodes ago. And whenever I was making mine, I had them kind of like in that 8 to 11 range. And I just like, you know what? I'm just going to piss some people off today. And it's like, I put them at 11 just to see what reaction I would get. It was not good, but
Not a good
Yeah.
reaction. Trust me. We
Not a
it,
good
was, it was a
reaction.
little much. It was a little much.
Connor, you know what? Here's what I'll tell you. I would prefer if everybody did that. I would much rather the Clippers be ranked there.
Make
and
them the
no-
underdog, right? Give,
Yeah.
give them that story.
Right, underdog. I think that the team is cool with it. Like, we're fine. At this point, I think everybody within the organization realizes, okay, this is a prove it year now. And so if that's the case and others want to rank them at that spot, that low, so be it. It's a prove it year, and they're going to go out and prove everybody. So I think if they quietly go about and let their play do the talking, that should be enough. But that's an if.
I think I had them at 3, so I judged them. I think where they should be.
I had them around. I think I had them around 5 or 6, but it solicited a lot of hate on Connor's end from a lot of our local friends there. But should be interesting. Jaden, go ahead.
So all our Ithaca players that we asked and they come onto the show, we ask about their pre-game routine. So you already mentioned it a little bit. Do you have a pre-game routine for yourself? I know when I call a game at Ithaca, I like to check myself out in the mirror. Dane definitely always has to use the bathroom. It's always something with it.
So, too much. I will say that.
I do, but it's because of the suits and I gotta make sure I look nice. Is there anything that you do in particular pre-game that maybe is different from other broadcasters or that just gets you ready for the game?
Well, first, let me say it's important to look good, as the great primetime Deion Sanders once said, look good, feel good, play good, play good, they pay good. So it's important to always look good.
That.
Yes, it's a cycle at that point. So I understand looking at yourself in the mirror, and I'm somebody who cares a lot about the stuff that I wear. Probably comes from my mom and sister. My mom worked in the fashion industry, so it just rubbed off on me, and I'm somebody who probably buys way too many clothes and shoes. So that's something that I need to work on, but I'm getting there. Anyway, that's a little tangent. I don't know if I have a singular pregame routine. Something I always have to do is vocal warm-ups, which I'd never done in college. And just full disclosure, I worked with a vocal coach after my senior year to try to maximize what I had. And she gave me some exercises to do that are going to help that. And they have immensely, where I have more in the tank down the stretch of a game than I did maybe when I was in college. So that's already just a learned behavior that I'm getting through. And those are things that I feel are important no matter what I do, whether it be a game for the Clippers, whether it be hosting the pre and post game for the Clippers, whether it be hosting a show on Tennis Channel or doing a show on Sirius XM. I always have to do the vocal exercises now to make sure that I'm completely warmed up. As she described to me, you wouldn't play a sport before you or after, you wouldn't play the sport before you stretched. You would do it after you stretch. And so those are just stretching your vocal cords in essence. So that's something I have to do. But other than that, no, I don't have a singular thing that I try to do. I make sure that I get my prep done ahead of time, but I might fill in some holes day of, things that come out later, quotes that might come out. I would say I try to work out day of games, especially if it's a later game. I'm going to try to get a workout in middle of the day to energize myself the rest of the way. I try to space out the eating. So it can be tough based on the circumstance, because if we're on the road, I don't know if the medium meal is going to be good or not. Plus, I'm eating the medium meal at maybe 3:30 or 4. So by the halftime or so of the game, like midway through a game, I'm hungry. So you've got to find ways to get through that. I always try to pack an extra snack for halftime, maybe some sort of energy bar or something, just to push me through the rest of the game. But I wouldn't say I have one clear-cut thing that I go to, any good luck charms or anything like that. I just go out and try to do the best I can.
I need to hear one vocal warm. I need to know. Now I need to know.
I
need one warm up.
Right
Are they like singing?
Reveal all the secrets. I'm already showing. I can tell you the names. I can tell you the names of the exercises. One are called purrs, which is basically making that hoarse noise with your mouth. You probably know what I'm talking about. If you it's basically blowing air but pushing your lips together. And if you change the pitch on that, it opens up this whole chest rib cage area. So the little things that you never think of, it also warms up the entirety of your mouth in that area. I didn't know any of this stuff, but apparently that's important, and you do it while you're stretching your other muscles. It's all connected somehow. So I don't question the science behind it, but I've gotten decent results from it. I will not be doing any of those. No.
Okay, that's fine. Just to let the people know.
From a journalist perspective, I appreciate you asking.
Hey, that's what they get. That's what they teach us, man. We gotta ask the real questions. What is No Eagles warm-ups, man? That's right. The real question.
Get in on the nitty-gritties. Now, you mentioned your mom. She worked in fashion. You got some nice shoes, and we actually planned a question. I saw on your Twitter on the tennis channel you were rocking some flashy kicks there. So we figured you were a pretty big shoe guy. So what do you got in your bag? Like, are you a flashy shoe guy? Like, what do you got?
Yeah, I am. It's a curse and a blessing, I guess, all at once. I got a lot of Jordans. I'm literally wearing right now as we do this interview. I can't fully pull it up. I'm wearing some Jordan 5s right now. Any retro J's are usually good. I have a couple pairs of ones. I just put in a bid for another pair of 4s, which is my favorite shoe, either the 3 or the 4s. I've got a pair of 3s. I've got 4 or 5 pairs of Air Force Ones, which I think you probably saw from Tennis Channel. I got, I think, 3 or 4 pairs of Air Max 90s, which I like a lot. So I've got a lot. It's a problem. I start stockpiling them. I keep telling myself, you know what, you should really save this paycheck. And then the other part of my mind says, or you can buy new shoes. And I'm like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do that. So it's a little bit of an issue that I'm working through, but it forces me now to stay motivated because I keep thinking, okay, the more jobs I get, the more shoes I can actually buy for myself. So you know what, let me try to book some more stuff as a result. But yeah, I'm a big shoe guy. The Tennis Channel stuff. So I said I worked there 14 straight days. I think I tried to get 11 different pairs of shoes in those 14 days, most of which were sneakers. And I almost full-time shifted to sneaker guy with suits now, which is a big thing out in LA. It's not as big back east, as you guys know.
Mm-hmm.
I was always a dress shoe or hybrid shoe type of guy when I was at Syracuse and even before that. But since moving out here, more and more people are willing to wear Jordans with their suits, wear Air Force Ones, wear whatever they can to make it look good. So I've just followed that suit. I like it more. It gives you a little bit more edge. So I try to switch it up as much as I possibly can. But yes, that is definitely a big part of my life.
Yeah, the extent of shoes, and when it comes to suits over here, at least from my fashion perspective, is having the white midsole. At least here over east, but I'm guessing over there, the sneaker game is strong. Have you reached the point yet where you're sorting now from high to low instead of low to high? Or is the paycheck money ain't that good yet? Ain't that good yet?
I'm always trying to find the best bargain somehow. If I feel like I'm fleecing somebody, then I feel good. There's no chance. I don't think I'll ever be able to look myself in the mirror or have my head hit the pillow if I'm going after those ones that are just absurdly out of this world.
No Air Mags yet. No Air Mags. No DR ones. No.
I can't get to that point yet. If I'm getting close to $1,000 for a pair of shoes, I'm out. There's just I can't do that to myself. Now, who knows? You know what? I can't say never because maybe there's one day in the future that I really, really go for it. But if I ever do that, I don't know if I'll be able to respect myself in the morning.
Okay, fair enough.
Wait, has there ever been a moment with the shoes where a player on the team, we know a lot of NBA players are big shoe guys. Have they ever seen some of your Jordans and been like, okay, Noah?
Yeah. Not necessarily on our team, but I did a couple of the virtual reality broadcasts for Turner Sports this year. And with that, they told me ahead of time, I was like, hey, what should I be wearing? And they said, oh, we like to go casual. So wear a jacket with a shirt with no tie and jeans and sneakers. I said, okay, great. So I wore a pair of my 4s to the game, and I was doing it with Rip Hamilton, who played a long time, obviously, with the Pistons, NBA champ, 3-time All-Star. And I'd gotten to know Chauncey Billups this year because he was our TV announcer, our TV analyst. And so I had become very close with Chauncey. And so I think Chauncey may have put a good word in for me with Rip. But I actually became close with Rip too. But one of the first things he said, he also wore 4s that day. So he looked down, he goes, oh, look at this. We're on the same wavelength. And I actually got a bunch of compliments on, for some reason, my shoes and my watch that day. It was in TD Garden. Actually, Lakers Celtics was the game. And it was the Celtics ended up blowing them out that day in Boston. But it was a really fun game to be a part of. That's another guy, now that I'm thinking about it, that I forgot to mention who I think is way better now after seeing them is Jason Tatum. Dude, he's out of this world good. And he's going to be an MVP candidate in the short order. But as I digress a little bit, so that's one time, at least, that happened. I would say Montrezl Harrell he's a big shoeaholic, closeaholic, kind of like me, but he definitely goes high to low, unlike me. So
fair enough.
He hasn't necessarily outright said anything, but he may have like looked at me once and kind of dapped me up, like, yeah, all right. So I take that as a win.
Any day.
Yeah, so the PJ Tucker of the broadcast booth, Noah Eagle, everyone. But just kind of reminiscing on some of the games that you've already called, what's your favorite memory of a game, either back at Syracuse or with your current gig right now, that you've called, whether it's a certain gameplay, player, or just anything in particular?
Well, the games that I got to do with my dad are really cool. And the first one in particular is one that'll never be matched, which was Syracuse, Miami, my junior year at Cuse. And I was fortunate enough to go to Florida and do the game. And he was doing it for CBS and got to interview him. And it was just a really cool weekend as a whole. And again, something I'll never forget. So that one's always going to stand out. And then we had an opportunity to do it again this year, twice before the shutdown, with the last one being the last game. He did that Golden State game for TNT, and I did it obviously for the Clippers. And so anytime I get to link up with him, because it's not often that I get to see him anymore, we're both busy and traveling and whatnot. So anytime I do get to see him is always special. And then when we get to call the same game, it's really cool. So those stand out. But in terms of just NBA games that were different, is Lakers Clippers every time at Staples Center. So sure, there was the one in the bubble, and even that one was fun. But when they played at Staples Center, full crowd, the energy, the aura, I thought I had experienced all of it in the Carrier Dome when it was Syracuse Duke and there were 35,000 people there, Syracuse Georgetown, when Tyus Battle, I was on the call when Tyus Battle hit the game winner against Georgetown, which is considered one of our biggest rivals. You know, you've got those moments ingrained in your head. I had a game where I called for our football team where we clinched bowl eligibility for the first time in forever, in 6 years. And being there for that and being around that team that won 10 games. Then we went to the Camping World Bowl and being around that. So all of those experiences certainly are there, but the aura of Lakers Clippers, and certainly with all of the surrounding storylines heading into the year, the fact that was game one and then Christmas Day and even the one in March, all three of those were just different. They just were. And so that's why we're all so excited for the potential of them meeting in the playoffs. And that's why, honestly, it might not be the worst thing in the world that they didn't meet this year, because it would be better if they met when it's at Staples Center and the crowd is there and you've got the energy. So I'm hoping that can be the case this year, because it really would be not just amazing for the city of Los Angeles, but I think for basketball fans everywhere.
Now, LA is still pretty much a Laker town, especially as they're coming off the title. But I mean, the Clippers, that big offseason last year, they're on the rise. What kind of split do you think Staples Center is whenever you got Clippers Lakers? Is it closer to 50-50 than most people think?
For a Clippers home game.
Yeah, for Clipper home games, it's closer. The Lakers, I still would say, just to give you perspective of how it works out here in LA, and I didn't realize how much of an extent, to what extent this was until I got out here and was doing these games. But every home game we have, there are people in Laker jerseys. And so I go up to some of them and I say, well, why are you here? Why are you coming to a Clipper Grizzlies game in the middle of a week on a Wednesday night in a Laker jersey? And they say, well, we can't afford a Laker game. I said, so you can afford the Clipper ticket, but you can't afford the Laker ticket and you're still a fan of the team you can't afford. They say, yeah, that's just how it works here. And it's just become expected out here. But the amount of people that can't afford to go to a Laker game, but can afford, and I know people that I went to school with that grew up in LA that told me the same thing. They said, yeah, I used to go to the Clipper games all the time because I could afford it. And so the Clippers this year, this is what I again, it's a huge credit to Steve, and he can do it because he's as wealthy as he is. And the team is doing still very well, despite not going all in the way that they could have this year. They could have raised their ticket prices because there was enough demand for it. People still would have bought them based on Kawhi being there, based on PG. They sold out just about every game this year. And they could have raised the ticket prices, but they didn't. They raised them only marginally so that people still could afford it. The Clippers' whole identity is for the common man of LA. The Lakers, in theory, is supposed to be the flashing lights, the glitz and glam. And so with that, that's where the high ticket prices come. So for a Clipper home game, think about how much Laker fans are willing to pay, because it's still going to be less than for a Laker home game. When it's Lakers Clippers, I'm talking about. And so if you're a Laker fan and it's a Clipper home game and you're going to get that potentially lower than you would a Laker game, you're going to do whatever you can to possibly get that. And so that's why it's still going to be outweighed in favor of the Lakers, because there are so many more Laker fans here. But there is a good base to Clipper Nation already that's been established. And I think what Steve is doing really well is saying, we want our own identity. We're going to get out of Staples Center. They're going to build this new arena in Inglewood. They're going to create their own little niche area. And their hope is they can grow the fan base alongside of that new arena, that new space, this whole new domain within the Los Angeles community. And I think he's got a great chance of doing it. The way that they've gone about it so far, they're not trying to steal Laker fans. That's not what they're doing. They understand that people who grew up Laker fans are always going to be Laker fans. People who grew up in the city in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, they're going to still bleed purple and gold. But what he's hoping is that next generation of fans, he can captivate them. He can find them by what he does in the community and the team and the product he's putting out onto the court. And I think little by little, he'll attract some, but it's always going to be Lakers, and that's just how it is. But the fact that Steve has already narrowed the gap to the point that he has is quite remarkable.
All right, I think it's time for possibly the greatest segment on Dribbling Around history. Jaden's jump ball. Hit the intro. Then they edit in the intro, and then we come back. All right, so this is Jaden's jump ball, and Noah, very simple here. Very simple. This is trivia, but not only any trivia about you. So it shouldn't really be that hard in a basic sense of it. But hey, I try to delve deep just a little bit. Things that you enjoy, things that you've been a part of, things that you've seen, and just to get a better insight and see if you could test the knowledge, test the mindset over here. So, all right, ready? First question. No pressure. No pressure.
I feel pressure.
Who hit the buzzer beater for Q's versus Duke back in 2017? I believe the month was February 7th, 2017. Right? About that
Yeah. Yeah, that was a banked in three by John Gillen. I was in the crowd. I actually stormed the court that day after John
We
Gillen
gotta
hit
find that. Oh, we gotta find that video.
Yeah, I've got it on my phone.
Okay.
That one, I remember watching that from my house. Like, I just remember Luke Kennard missing it, and Tyus. I thought Tyus wasn't gonna get the ball up the floor before he got it to John. That whole home, they were such a home road squad that year.
Oh yeah. They were dominant at home. They could never win on the road. It was bizarre.
That was a crazy year. I know they didn't make the tournament, but that game was something special, I will say.
Yeah, and everyone thought, Dickie V included, that game would seal it. Top 10 win against Duke with Tatum on the team and Kennard and Harry Giles and Grayson Allen. And Hughes finds a way to claw through. They had a couple of huge wins. I think 3 top 10 wins at home that year. And so everyone thought, you have 3 top 10 wins, you're going to make the tournament. Of course, they didn't. Then they lose to Ole Miss, Terrence Davis in particular, in the NIT. So interesting year, bizarre year. They were super talented. I was surprised that they weren't better than they were, but a really fun team to be around. So yes, John Gillen. I feel good now. 1 of 1. That's a good start.
Very good start. Very good start. So some people didn't even make it past question number 1. So definitely off to a great start. In your first regular season game, calling play-by-play for the Clippers, who scored the first Clippers bucket?
First Clippers bucket of the season. Wow. Now you're going deep.
Yeah.
So the starting 5.
I figure you would remember it's your first one.
I can tell you the starting 5. It was Patrick Beverley, Landry Shamet, Kawhi Leonard, Patrick Patterson, and Ivica Zubac. So of those 5, who scored the first bucket? I want to say Beverly.
Incorrect.
Was it Patterson?
No, it's Zubac.
Zubats.
Yeah.
Okay. That was good. That was a good question. Yeah, that was a good question.
Yeah, you know, we do our research here on Dribbling Around. You know, that I think that's our tagline. But we make sure we get all the facts down straight. So now we're delving even deeper, and now this is super mental. Your grandfather was the first to step his foot into the door of media and throughout the whole family. Obviously, great lineage, and he was the first one to do it. But he obviously a little different from you. He started off as an actor, best known for his time in commercials and that Super Bowl IV commercial. Do you remember his role in the commercial or what company it was for?
Yeah, of course I do. We have a cardboard cutout of it back home in New Jersey. I've got stickers of it. I could tell you his catchphrase if you need it. That Xerox commercial, yes. He was the Xerox monk, was his title, so to speak. Brother Dominic was the exact name of the character. And man, he crushed it. He really did. That completely changed the trajectory of his career because, in fact, before he was an actor, he was, if you want to go all the way back, he actually dropped out of high school to join a traveling band as a trumpeter. And then after that, he was just telling jokes to people, and they go, you should do that for a living. So he became a comedian. And then that led into the acting and the comedian actor combo. But it didn't happen until later in his career. So he was getting close to 50 and he got that big break and he started just banking commercial after commercial. But that really set it off. And he was also in, if you want the extra trivia to it, he was also in the OJ Hertz commercials. Yeah, he was the one saying, go OJ, go. Wow. And you can find him in the OJ 30 for 30 as well. He's the short, plump Jewish man.
I would love to see the awards in that household. Just all the awards.
His other big role, just for example, was Mr. Cholesterol. I mean,
yes,
he played
I saw that
somebody
one
whose cholesterol was so high that he was known as Mr. Cholesterol. Like, I don't know if that's good or bad, but my dad said they would be on the subway back in Queens or something, and someone go like shout out like Mr. Cholesterol. He go, hey, yeah, that's me. Cholesterol.
All right. 2 out of 3. That's all the questions.
I think that gets extra credit.
Yeah, 100%. I was about to say that gets an A++. But 2 out of 3. I'll tally that down. But very good. Very, very good.
I'm a fan of the segment.
We got one. All right, we got one. But so we just have a couple more questions to wrap up, and I'll start. But already being 23 and having a full-time job in the NBA, nonetheless, the Los Angeles Clippers. What else do you kind of have like on that bucket list? Like, what else do you want to achieve in your broadcast media career?
You know, I don't know if there's any one thing that I'm looking at and saying I have to do this, or this. Something my dad has made a habit of, and I think it's a really good goal for any broadcaster, is to try something new and do something new and add something to the list every year. So every year of his long career now, almost 3 decades from the time he graduated college on, he has done at least one new thing every year. And so for me, I can say the same. Last year was everything basically, but being a play-by-play calling an NBA game. This year already in 2020, I've gotten that virtual reality experience. I got to call the French Open. So I'm adding these new things. So if I can keep adding something new every year, I'm going to feel like I'm doing something right. And I'm always going to be taking a step forward. A big goal for me, and this should also be a goal for every broadcaster, no matter how many years of experience you've had. And I've had many of the most illustrious broadcasters tell me the same thing. You should always feel like your next game is better than your previous one. And that's what I want for me. And I felt like I did that this year. Is game 1 was nowhere close to game 50. Game 50 was nowhere close to game 90. And now next year, I'm hoping that game 90 of this year is nowhere close to game 1 of next year. Every game should be better than the last one. So sharpen those skills, get a little bit more concise in your delivery, or let's say smoother in this area versus this area. It's just natural how that's going to happen. But if you're not constantly trying to improve, then that's where you start to have a problem. If you start to get complacent, then where's the motivation for the job? So those are some things that I'm always going to be looking at. But I don't necessarily think that there's any one thing that I'm thinking, like saying to myself, if I could do that one day, that would be it. That's the tip of the iceberg. I think as long as I'm happy doing what I'm doing, that's cool. I would love to do stuff in entertainment. I did some of that in college, and I feel like I've got the knowledge base to do it. Hopefully the personality, and we'll see. We'll see if that comes to fruition one day. Cards are on.
I was gonna pencil you into professional wrestling. There's something about you. I don't know about, but I just calling professional ref. There's something about you. As soon as the first word you spoke to that, I felt it.
Jaden says that because he is an avid fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a fan. I can't be a fan.
WWE guy.
Yeah, I can be a fan.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
But what's it called? I said there's something about it. I was like, you know what? I could see him doing that. I could see him doing that.
I wouldn't be opposed. I wouldn't be opposed. I'm somebody who welcomes any challenge. So if that's a challenge that I'm fortunate enough to have a chance to actually go out and do, mark me down. I'll do it.
I felt it. I felt the vibe.
Last question for you, Noah. You've talked a lot about the Clippers. They might be doubted a little bit next year. There might be some panic, but you've talked about there's plenty of optimism still with this team. Are you willing to say next year, are they your title pick for next season?
I can't say anything. You kidding? I'm an employee of the team. I can't.
You got to give us a bold take. You got to give us a clip to throw on our Instagram.
I told you my bold take is
Yes, he did give us
That's
that.
like all of our bold takes, though. Like, of course, said that like 3 weeks ago. I was like, dang, this is actually going to be good. And then Vegas releases the odds.
Here's what I'll say. I will say this. I think I already alluded to it a little bit, but I think that this team's motivated. I think these guys are really motivated based on how the season ended. So if I had to say, do I believe that they're going to be able to bounce back? Absolutely. Based on the personnel, based on the coaching staff, I think they've got the right pieces in place, and they're going to even try to tweak it a little bit further to put themselves in that position. Am I going to outright say that they're winning the title? I can't. I just look at the Western Conference alone. Considering you've got Golden State coming back into the fold, you've got a couple teams who missed the playoffs that are going to be fighting for playoff spots in Memphis and New Orleans and even maybe Phoenix. And all those teams that made the playoffs expect to be back there next year. And some of them expect to be better. Denver thinks they're going to take a step forward. Dallas thinks they're going to take a step forward. Portland thinks they're going to take a step forward. Who knows what the situation is in Houston? San Antonio, who missed the playoffs, ended the year very strong. And I don't doubt Greg Popovich's ability to rally the troops. So just the Western Conference alone, I didn't even mention Minnesota, who most people think are like the one team that they don't give much of a chance. They still have Karl Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, and potentially adding the number 1 overall pick in whoever they choose. So you've got every team in the West that is going to be a tough out. So I can't definitively say anybody in the NBA has the upper hand right now over anybody else, which is what makes the league so exciting. If you think back to what was the biggest complaint when the Warriors were dominating? It was like, oh, it's so predictable as to what's going to happen. Right now, the NBA is anything but predictable. You could have how many teams in the East if you think about it? Milwaukee, Boston, Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Miami, I didn't even mention yet. Indiana, who knows what they look like. So you've got all these teams in the East. You've got all these teams in the West. There are very few teams that I go into the season and say, they don't really have a chance to win it. The vast majority of the teams have at least a small outside chance of saying, okay, yeah, if everything breaks right for them, they could somehow find a way to squeak through. That's what makes this year so difficult. And that's why if you're smart, you don't choose anybody.
So thank you again, Noah, for joining us. It's been great talking to you. And as a Clipper panicker, hearing you talk about the team is a little bit sobering as someone who didn't see all the behind the scenes stuff that you just shared with us. So I appreciate that. And hopefully we get to hear you call some games next season whenever it starts. Make sure to follow Noah on Twitter and Instagram. You might be able to see him bust out a couple post-victory dance moves on Twitter. And if you're a fan of the Clippers, he's a must follow. But that's all for us. So once again, this is Noah Eagle. Thanks for coming on and take care, man.
Guys, I appreciate you having me on. This was fun, and we'll do it again down the road.
For sure. Hopefully
Clippers
win
Bulls
the playoffs.
finals. Clippers Bulls finals.
Bulls, yes, okay. I'll take it.
We had Josh Longstaff on the show, I think back in like July. So it's like we've always just been kind of like fingers crossed that he gets a ring and we can just have an NBA champion coach come on the show. But hey, if we can have an NBA champion radio broadcaster, that's a good other option.
I'll take it. We're either going to get, if it's not Clippers Bulls, let's hope it's the Eagle Bowl and we got Clippers Nets. That would be fun
would be something.
Thanksgiving's going to be awkward.
It would be, right? It would be. So, well, I'll just have to post them up again, just show me. Well, that's all right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, have a good one.
Thank you.